Good day. Welcome to the Nova Ransford's weekly wraps. I'm both Governor, and as usual, what we'll do is start off with a general market segment at the start, and then go and end up with a tech segment at the end. In our general market segment, we'll talk about first the US Fed minutes, and then the latest in Israel and the Middle East. And in our AI segment, we'll cover the following topics: the recent troubles at OpenAI, Nvidia's results, and Microsoft's co-pilot initiatives. Okay, let's start off with the US Fed. Most recent US Fed minutes came out, and a couple interesting things to be looked at there. Number one, we are seeing a situation in which the Fed is basically opening up about the possibility of rate hikes again. This is obviously a very unlikely scenario, but it is something we have mentioned before. We were talking about the fact that the chance of the next move for the Fed being a hike was probably 1 in 10, 1 in 5, which was 15%, 10%, 1 in 10, 1 in 7, around about there, by our just a thumb-sucking kind of idea. In terms of what that means for the market, if we do have the next move being a hike instead of a cut, I think it would be extremely negative for markets. I mean, we've seen the market basically run ahead based on the idea that we'll have multiple cuts this year. And even though the chance of cuts have come down and we only like have 1, maybe 2 this year, if that, the market still hasn't really pulled back significantly. If we, on the other hand, were to switch around and start looking at rate hikes, I think that would be maybe a trigger that would shift market sentiments quite negative. And we might just see a pullback to some of the levels we saw in the middle of last year. For those that don't know, we've risen significantly from about October last year to where we're at now, where we are hitting almost all-time highs in the US, S&P, etc. I do think that the inflation data that's been coming out of the last little while could easily be used to justify a hike, especially when combined with some of the employment numbers and so on we've been seeing. Inflation data in the US seems to be stalling out in terms of its ability to fall, and in fact is showing slight signs of being sticky, above 3% for the US. The US target range is about 2%. So this is significantly higher. 3 versus 2 is like much higher, 50% difference. That is obviously something that the US Fed cannot afford to have happen, because it would severely damage their credibility if inflation starts or kind of stabilizes around 3+% as opposed to the 2% target. So they have to do something about this. Unfortunately, what they would have to do is raise interest rates. The most recent economic numbers from the US have been slightly soft, but by no means indicating that there's a recession on the go at the moment. Employment is slightly worse off, but not anywhere near what one would think is terrible levels. In fact, by some measures, it's still at a level that's probably above full employment. So that means there's too many people employed in the US. Those factors would probably justify a rate hike. Things against the rate hike is, firstly, the US Fed has come out and talked about a rate cut, and so maybe there's some market anticipation around that. There's a political event happening this year, the US election, that might make it difficult to hike rates into that, which is generally the Fed doesn't be too close to an election in terms of its rate hike moves. And then, of course, there is the issue around what's been happening with regards to the global situation with the dollar, etc. out there. We are seeing, for instance, in Europe, inflation rates have come down more. The UK had the recent inflation numbers showing a fall, not as much as anticipated, but still a fall. But they're getting close to the 2%. So they're probably going to look at cutting interest rates earlier than the Fed, and so is Europe as well. And it depends what's going to be happening in the globe as well in terms of what the Fed's rate decision is going to be looked at. So the Fed wants to probably cut rates. The Fed is looking for an excuse to cut rates. Unfortunately, the market, the economy is not giving it an excuse at the moment. And in fact, it might just come to a point where we might see a rate hike come through. Again, I'm pretty much of the opinion that it's a minority decision, position. I will still put it around about 1 in 10, 1 in 7 chance of it happening. So moving on to the Middle East. Some developments in the Middle East over the last little while. We haven't talked about it in a while. The Israel war in Gaza still continues. There's been a couple of developments over the last little while that might be interesting. Firstly, we've seen the death of Prime Minister of Iran in a helicopter crash. It does seem that it's probably an accident. Helicopters are dangerous, by the way. If you ever want to go on a ride in a helicopter, I would say no. Not just this crash. I mean, look at Kobe Bryant, died in a helicopter crash as well. Helicopters are a pretty dangerous way of flying around. If you want to fly, get on a plane. Helicopters, I think, more convenient and whatever, but quite dangerous for what it's worth. What else we've seen is sentiment continues to shift against Israel. We saw Norway, Spain, and Ireland come out and basically recognize Palestine as a state. This basically follows most of the developing world. So you look at the developing world, and pretty much every developing country supports the idea of a Palestinian state or recognizes a Palestinian state. Pretty much the only parts of the world that don't recognize a Palestinian state are North America, US primarily, and Europe, Western Europe primarily as well there. Now that we're seeing Norway, Spain, Ireland shifting over, these are not the biggest countries in Europe, but they are pretty significant. Spain is one of the biggest countries in Europe. Ireland, Norway, wealthier countries. I think this might indicate a shift against Israel. I think that's something that's been happening for quite some time now, for the last, I would think, several months at least. The only, I would think, countries that will probably stick by Israel's side in the foreseeable future in terms of guaranteed way is probably the UK, Israel, UK, Germany, and the US. The US and Germany, I think, are pretty strong and unlikely to change. The UK might just change with a new government coming to play. Trudeau's Labour Party is likely to take power in the next election, which has just been announced. And I think that is probably going to be, negative for the UK support of Israel, as well as the UK support of things like Ukraine as well. The Labour Party tends to be a bit more left-wing, but less, pro-aligning with the US when it comes to these kind of things. Though it must be mentioned that Tony Blair was pretty firmly on George Bush's side when he went to war in Iraq. So that's been the latest developments in Israel. What does this really mean for the world? Quite frankly, I don't see things expanding beyond, Israel-Gaza at the moment. There's been some kind of rocket fire between Israel and Lebanon, but I don't think that's going to escalate anytime. I think neither parties want that to go further. And between Israel and Iran, I don't think that there is real motivation on either party's side, as we can be witnessed by the last interaction between the two countries, where Israel killed some Iranian, official. The Iranians attacked Israel, but kind of on purpose, kind of missed to make sure there wasn't too much damage. Israel kind of responded in a similar kind of manner when both parties kind of just said, no, we don't want to increase tensions any further. And if this does turn out to be an accident, as most people think it is, I don't think there'll be much of a change there. But what I do think is going to be a change going forward is some of the movements in Europe, especially around recognizing Gaza. I think we're getting to a point at which reversals in terms of Israel's diplomatic might or diplomatic power are tending to be quite significant. I think chances of some Abraham Accord kind of deals with places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, etc., are diminishing quite rapidly. And I think if you might say look forward a year from now, you could easily find a situation in which the only major powers supporting Israel in a guaranteed way are pretty much, like I said, the US, Germany, and possibly the UK. Okay, so let's move on to the big segment of this week, which is going to be AI. We have a number of big AI stories coming out. Let's start with some of the most salacious stuff, which is what's happening with OpenAI. Two big stories there. One is, I think, is a real story. One, I think, is a bit of a fake story. But, as usually these things go, the fake story is getting more attention. The fake story is that Sam Altman authorized the mimicking of Scarlett Johansson's voice for Sky, which is one of the voice options for ChatGPT 4.0, okay, or 4.0, I don't know how you pronounce it. But the latest version, that the one that's multimodal, that one that they had the demonstration for, like a week ago, there is an argument on the behalf of Scarlett Johansson that that voice is quite close to her. She says that people that know her think that was her, and therefore she basically asked them, clarification. And she's been litigious in the past. She's sued Disney for quite a bit of money and won that, and so she might be willing to sue OpenAI as well for this. There is indications that this kind of stuff does break the law and does result in payments. I mean, there was a case for a singer where a sound-like singer did something, and the original singer was able to sue and get compensation for that. There's been cases where people have mimicked voices on advertisements, etc. and have been basically paid out for that. And so this could be a case where that is true. On behalf of OpenAI, I think the case is pretty weak. Firstly, I didn't particularly identify that voice as Scarlett Johansson. There was no indication that this was Scarlett Johansson's voice, or someone trying to be Scarlett Johansson. It does appear to be based on a real human being. And Scarlett Johansson doesn't have a particularly distinctive voice. It's not, for instance, a Robert De Niro or Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of voice, where there's a particular someone can do a Sylvester Stallone impression or a Arnold Schwarzenegger impression, and you kind of know it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've never seen somebody do a Scarlett Johansson impression and just identify immediately that's Scarlett Johansson. So I don't think that that is quite as strong there. And like I said, it's a real person, and you can argue that she just maybe is doing the same accent, but that might just be her accent. And so yeah, I think this is a bit of a weak attack on OpenAI. Now for a more difficult attack on OpenAI. A lot of people I've mentioned have left OpenAI over the last several weeks. Some senior people, and it's emerged that there is a thing in OpenAI's contract with these people that when they leave and they make any disparagement statements against OpenAI, they could stand to lose their shares in OpenAI, which is significant amounts of money. One individual mentioned the fact that the amount of money that he would stand to lose if he talked about OpenAI was something like 85% of his net worth. So it'd be 15%. So whatever it is right now, we're talking about 7 times as much money, as what is currently, worth outside of OpenAI shares would be lost. Remember, OpenAI is currently worth tens of billions, so close to $100 billion. Microsoft has put in over 10 billion already in investments, and right now as a leader in the sector that's as red hot as it is, I wouldn't be surprised if it went public. It would be worth more than $100 billion, maybe even more than 200 billion. The market goes, and if you were one of the original shareholders there, or with the employees, remember there's less than 1,000 employees at OpenAI, and let's just say you were given 0.01% or something of it. 0.01% of $100 billion. You can do a calculation yourself. That's basically 1/10,000 of $100 billion. That's like $10 million. That's not peanuts. And this is for someone that's owning 1/10,000 of something, which is only 1,000 employees. You know what I mean? That's not an inconceivable amount for some of these senior people. People that are leaving are people like Elias Skyer, also people that former head of the AI alignment department. Some senior individuals are leaving. I wouldn't be surprised if they've had shareholdings, that currently are worth more than $10 billion here. Maybe even some places, closer to, $10 million, $100 million or $100 million. Pretty substantial amounts of money. And like I said, it emerged that OpenAI has this contract when they leave, that if they make any statements OpenAI doesn't like, they lose a shareholding. Well, Sam Altman comes out and says, no, this is not true. He did not know about it if it is true. Rather, let me put it that way. So he's saying that, no, you can say whatever you want to say about OpenAI. If you leave, you will not lose your shares. This is a pretty big scandal because he's denying what is basically something that's in writing. The contract states quite clearly this is the case. And apparently his signature is, on the documentation that put this through. Now, look, I mean, I've operated in large companies. I work for, pretty sophisticated organizations and so on. And often you sign stuff that you may not read every single word or line of, especially if you're in charge of a big company. Or I've never been in charge of a multi tens of billions, if on $100 billion company. I've not been in charge of a $1 billion company, quite frankly. But I've been in positions of some authority at some companies, and I've often signed things, and you obviously are required to read through a lot of stuff, but something might slip your mind, so that could be the case here, especially if you're operating on a very high stress, high bandwidth kind of thing, like trying to create an artificial mind. So it's possible that this is a situation where he might have skipped his notification, but it's always a thing that I doubt when somebody says, oh, it's something that I've skipped this notification, is something that basically benefits me entirely, and I should have been aware of. That is something I think that obviously is a problem, and I do think that in terms of what OpenAI is looking at the moment, the fact that it's happening at the same time we had the Scarlett Johansson situation damages OpenAI's credibility, Sam Altman's credibility in particular, The fact he's losing people, the fact the people that are leaving are getting a pretty raw deal, and the fact that he may have just, kind of, defrauded one of the most famous movie stars in the world. Or just to mention the Scarlett Johansson thing, there were actually negotiations between OpenAI and Scarlett Johansson to use her voice, and she denied them permission eventually, and that would make this particularly, bad for Sam Altman if this does turn out to be a case where he did in some way mimic her. He also, by the way, tweeted her, just one word, her. Her, by the way, refers to a movie that Scarlett Johansson starred in about an AI assistant, kind of like GPT 4.0. So, a lot of coincidental evidence here. So, yeah, like I said, like lots of reputational hits for OpenAI over the last week. Next, Nvidia results came out, spectacular, showing huge, increases in from a year ago in the data center business, showing massive improvement in terms of demand and profitability. There's going to be a share split. There is going to be a higher dividend being given out. Share price went up about 7% in aftermarket trading. So overall, very good numbers, which kind of makes sense. Right now, what it appears to be is that most people spending more money on AI are basically spending more money on Nvidia's products. And that is something I think that looks to be continuing going forward, at least for the next year or so, unless somebody comes up with a really serious rival to Nvidia's chip architecture, which doesn't seem to be occurring at the moment. And it's not just companies, by the way. I mean, it's not just Microsoft spending 100 billion on their Stargate system. It's not just Google. It's not just Meta. It's countries. It's the United Arab Emirates. It's Saudi Arabia. It's the UK. It's the US government. It's China through covert means. By the way, on the OpenAI video results, they were seeing significant drops in demand from China. But there is evidence that the Chinese are trying to get these chips by other means. So eventually those chips are not going to be stolen. They're going to basically be bought and then transferred illicitly to China. But that is still going to be money that goes into Nvidia's pocket. So Nvidia's results extremely good. And then finally, let's end off with Microsoft Copilot. They have come out with a PC that they claim is faster than Apple's flagship model. That would be kind of like the first PC that kind of has native AI, which goes inbuilt into it. A lot of the stuff that AI would be doing would be localized on the machine, so you'd have less security issues. And there are security issues what they are asking you to basically trust them with. This would be a system that looked at every single thing that we put up on the screen, every button that you press on your computer, every video that you take, and every kind of thing that you load up into that machine. That is the kind of thing we're talking about here. You can imagine the amount of stuff that goes through your PC. Can you imagine the amount of stuff that you basically do on your PC that is highly confidential? You file your taxes, you basically do your bank statements, you talk to your loved ones, you email them stuff. You can imagine if there was an AI that looked at every single thing you did on the PC and was able to understand it and able to basically answer questions about it. That is a huge, huge privacy vulnerability. And I think this is the first step that Microsoft is taking in this direction, and it remains to be seen just how much the uptake is. The first impressions I've gotten from places like X/Twitter, Facebook, and so on has been the users, not the companies. But this is found to be a little bit creepy. Creepiness is important. People find things to be creepy; they don't use it. But on the other hand, with what's been happening to AI, this could be a huge, productivity boost. So maybe people use it for their work PC, but not for their personal PCs. Who knows? But I think this is the next form factor, the next, front in the AI development case, where your AI is given access to lots of information, and which makes it a lot more useful, but I guess a lot creepier, makes you a lot more vulnerable to invasions of your privacy. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Cheers.